As always, most railroads run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and 365 days a year. Driving freight trains can be a challenge, like trying to get from point A to point B without any issues. Minor issues can be bad enough, but when it comes to big issues or fatal issues, it can carry consequences. Like, for example, if you're not getting a good amount of sleep or a good amount of rest for that matter, it can not only be catastrophic, and it can also affect others. And that's exactly what happened at Thompsontown 36 years ago. This is the story of the 1988 Thompsontown train collision. On January 14, 1988, Conrail TV61 departed Harrisburg at around 6:30 a.m. heading toward Chicago. The train had 3 engines on the head end, with Conrail's B36-7, number 5017, and 2 Conrail GP40-2s, 3394 and 3054, pulling 61 flatbeds loaded with over 100 piggyback trailers and containers. The train also has 3 crew members on board, an engineer and a brakeman in the lead locomotive, and a conductor in the third locomotive. Heading in the opposite direction was Conrail UBT-506. The train left Altoona at 5:45 a.m. heading towards Baltimore, Maryland. The coal train was being pulled by 2 Conrail SC40s, number 6265 and 6349, pulling 105 hoppers, all fully loaded with coal, with an engineer and the brakeman in the lead locomotive, and the conductor in the second locomotive. So far, the trip has been uneventful for both trains. Nothing to worry about yet. Just wanted to get the trains from point A to point B to get the day over with. From the outside, nothing was amiss. However, inside the cab of the lead engine of the coal train, it was a completely different story. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Now, before we move on to the collision itself, let's talk about some details about how and why this disaster unfolded, from what's going on inside the cab of the coal train to other factors. So, let's break down the details. According to the NTSB report, the engineer and the brakeman from the coal train both went off duty for about 40 hours, while the conductor went off duty for about 53 hours. The conductor of the coal train stated that he didn't notice anything unusual between the engineer and the brakeman. In fact, he goes on saying that both of them had good spirits on that fateful day of the accident. However, it doesn't really tell much about why that collision unfolded. So let's jump back from the beginning. Meaning, let's jump back at the time the crew went on duty that morning. All three crew members of the coal train went on duty at 2:30 a.m. and had been on duty for 5 hours by the time of the accident. It was still unclear to this day why the coal train failed to stop, but there's a possible theory. And only one theory. The engineer and the brakeman of the coal train were either fatigued, feeling very tired, or possibly fell asleep. And this was not the first time that happened to the coal train engineer, because back in 1974, he was suspended for 5 days after he admitted to fall asleep while he was on duty on a train. So the engineer and the brakeman of the coal train were either once again feeling fatigued, very tired, or possibly fell asleep at the controls, due to possibly a poor quality of sleep or not having a good night's sleep last night. However, could they still save the train? Well, the answer is yes and no. Inside the cab of the locomotives was a dead man's pedal that every engineer must keep depressed during operation. If it's let go, a warning goes off. If nothing happens, the train automatically stops. However, most engineers put heavy objects on the dead man's pedal because they find the pedal rather annoying. So with that out of the way, let's move back to the collision itself. As both trains were getting closer and closer at 143.6, the two trains collide head-on with one another at 7:54 a.m. 5 locomotives from both trains and multiple cars from both trains went off the tracks, with 4 out of 5 locomotives from both trains annihilated, with one flipped over on its side and suffered catastrophic damage. To make matters even more dire, the fuel tanks for the locomotives ignited and the fire soon began, spreading through the crash site, even spreading through the derailed coal cars. One eyewitness saw smoke coming through the mountains, and all 6 crew members from both trains were now trapped among the wreckage. When firefighters arrived, they had a hard time putting out the fire, but the fire was soon brought under control. But the damage was done. In all, 4 people died: the engineers and the brakemen of both the piggyback train and the coal train. The conductors from both the piggyback and the coal train suffered injuries but were alive. And the wreck in total was over $6 million. The National Transportation Safety Board released a final report on February 14, 1989. In the end, all 5 locomotives from both trains were deemed damaged beyond repair and scrapped, along with some of the coal cars and the flatbeds that were damaged in the crash. It's been 36 years since that collision occurred, but would this be the last time we would ever hear a train crew falling asleep while they're operating the train? Sadly, the answer will be no. It will happen again several times within the years to come. And that's also a story for another day.